Al sat down one day and said to me, it's time one of us had an affair. Everybody's getting tired of this, bored with this perfect marriage, and so am I. And it wasn't even a romantic marriage. I mean, I didn't get chocolates on Valentine's Day or anything like that. It's, hi, honey, how did things go at the office? So, you know, that he could go talking about the black storylines again, the white storylines again. I went home and I wrote a proposal for the introduction of a character called Jack Scott. And I wrote it about the whole, I wrote from time to time for the show. And they were very happy to have me do so for nothing, because I was willing to do it for nothing. And I don't feel cheated by that, because I went into it with my eyes wide open, and from my point of view, politically, I was getting an enormous thing out of it. I was being able to get intelligent blacks on a camera, and for me, that was heaven. So I didn't care that they didn't want to go through a whole formal, we'll pay you if you, whatever. That's okay. You want to put me on for free? Good. So I don't feel gypped by that at all. I went into that for me and got what I wanted out of it, or would have if they hadn't done what they did. I wrote a proposal in which, because Al was so right about how boring our marriage is, you know, nobody wants to watch a perfect marriage. It's like watching paint dry, you know. So anyway, I wrote this proposal about this very tough guy who was a perfectionist and a whatever and a solo, who came to the hospital, Jack Scott. We were going to fall in love and I was going to divorce Al, and then he was going to die. I'm all the time not thinking of making our marriage more interesting. I wrote the proposal and it went up on Doris Quinlan's watch, all the way up to Fred Silverman. By the time it got his imprimatur and came down, Joe Stewart was there. So he was the one that was going to cast the thing. I was, at the time, I had been engaged to be married to a brilliant actor called J.A. Preston. And it was over. His idea, not mine. It was over. But he was a brilliant actor, and I thought he would be brilliant in the role. The one wonderful thing that Joe Stewart would do would be to fly him in to play the role. I sent him the script 2 weeks beforehand. When Jay got off the plane, and he hadn't learned the lines, I saw the whole thing happen. He was going to go in there, he was going to blow it, he was going to lose the job because he really didn't want it. He probably just took the airplane ride in to see his New York friends, and he really wanted to be out in California making movies. The moment he got off the plane and he hadn't learned those lines, I felt so betrayed. I crossed him off the list. And sure enough, that whole thing played out just the way I thought it was going to play out. And he made himself uncastable. And so I was called into Joe Stewart's office. He had promised me input, which I deserved, not only as the person who had to play opposite him, whoever was chosen, but as the writer who had created the character. He didn't ask me what I thought. He told me that he was about to sign a person I call Martin, because I have difficulty saying negative things about people unless I change their names. Martin, the person I call Martin in the book, was the one person that I had auditioned opposite that I was absolutely horrified by. I'm standing next to somebody who so loathed me and detested me, it was all he could do to keep from, he just oozed this sense of repulsion at standing next to me. When he told me he was going to cast this guy, I said, and then I realized I must not cry. I knew that if I cried, he would think that was dirty poo. They've got all the cards in their hands. You know, as I say in my book, the louder voice to shout you down, the bigger muscles to beat you up, and the bigger job to yank yours. They've got all this in their hand. So, but still, you must not cry. So I tried to explain to him as clinically as possible that this wasn't a question of not feeling in sympathy with this guy or being on his same wavelength or whatever. It was a case of my feeling that I was, as I had never seen this man before, I was in the vicinity of a sociopath who I reminded him of someone in his life that he detested. I mean, it was as serious as that. I made it clear to him. I was petrified of working with him. And I made it clear that under no circumstances. I said, you took one of the early things in my proposal where I had written the hard part where we're raging at each other. I said, he will never be able to do a romantic. It's just not possible. He can't stand me. He oozes hate like perspiration. This is not, he said, well, that's who I'm going to hire. I'm afraid you'll just have to make your peace with it. And then I broke down and I started sobbing. And I said to him, please don't do this to me. Please don't do this to me. And he dismissed me. He was furious. I begged him not to do it. And then he proceeded to jam that man down my throat for the 2 years of his contract. And I got to the place where I started to deteriorate as a person because I'm one of those people who has to be absolutely ultra prepared to even have a shot at being able to go in and do the thing the right way. I would go into a day where whether I was left alone or whether I was called up and shoot out depended on somebody else's work, somebody else's performance. And this guy would come in the morning without having even looked at his script. And I was called up to the office. And Joe Stewart said to me, you're intimidating him? You're forcing him to go up on his lines? Cut it out! Like that. This far from my eyeball. And then he wove a whole scenario out of that was totally untrue. That it was my problem. That I was deliberately sabotaging him because he hadn't chosen Jay, he'd chosen this guy. And that was that's the reality that he created around the whole show. That the problem was my fault. There was a third director who only came in once in a while, and I can see him now. He was sitting up on the counter, and he gave me a direction. He said to me, he was rehearsing us sort of offhandedly in the makeup room, and he said, I want you to speak up, talk more urgently to him. I said, but that doesn't make any sense. He said it so gently that that wouldn't be the right response. He said, don't come in here with your problems with Martin. Well, I jumped up out of the chair. I grabbed him by the throat and I said, don't turn me into a hack just because you are. And then I saw myself, what I had just done. If I had pressed that thing in the aorta in judo, you can kill somebody right away, I could have been up for manslaughter. I went down to the tower at ABC and learned for the first time where the big brass all were, and went up in the tower, and I went to Josie Emmerich, who was the vice president in charge of daytime television. And I told her, you have got to do something. My 3-year contract is coming up. I am supposed to be a tentpole character here. I'm supposed to be here to the end of time. I have got to be. I am now in my 50s. For 51, 40, I was on the borderline of 49, 50, 51, right around in there. I said, I have to be able to. I am not married. Now I feel I never will. I said, I have got to be able to. I cannot stay on this job unless something is done about this. So she pretended to be, I think she was concerned. She's a decent woman. She's a very decent woman, Josie Emmerich. She's a nice woman. But I knew, coming down in that elevator, there is no one watching your back but you. Now get yourself together and you do what you have to do. When I got down to the lobby, I had made up my mind that it was better, even though I didn't know what in God's name I was going to do. My situation was so ugly and filthy and dirty and ugly, and I hated it so much. I would be happier working at the end of a counter, not even being the cashier, but being at the end of the thing, bagging the groceries. I could get a job like that, and that was better than what was going on with me. When I got down to the lobby, I experienced a respect for myself that I had never had before.